Hey guys, so quick video talking about how to do an actual sprint training session. I've seen a lot of the time with the riders that I coach, they comment that they just can't improve their sprint power. When I then go out and ride with them sometimes and see them actually try and do a sprint PB, they're just not really executing a sprint training session right. So I thought I'd just share with everyone some tips for when you go out and you do your next dedicated sprint training session. Before you get out there though, first tip would be not to, I see a lot of the time when I'm analyzing a session, riders have managed to like press the lap button just before the sprint starts. And that's not, not a good habit to get into. It's not a good habit to be sort of moving your hands, pressing lap, rushing back to the drops to then start your sprint so you can perfectly capture the lap. I would say don't worry about the lap. Go and analyze and create laps in Strava or whatever after. But if you do want to see sort of your power for each sprint throughout a sprint session, you can bring up on the screen here, this is a screen that has max lap power. What this means is this is showing me the max power for the current lap I'm on. So what I'll do is I'll just, before I start my sprint, maybe 10 minutes before I start my first sprint, I'll just press the lap button. So then it's tracking my max power for the current lap I'm on. I will then do my sprint, look down, and it'll show me my max power that I've hit for the current lap. Okay, let's roll out and I'll show you my setup tips for a sprint. I'm a big fan of starting sprints at a defined point. So if I'm doing sprints in Centennial Park, I will do them in this section down the bottom half. And I always start the sprint at that stop sign. So it means I can roll in off the downhill here, run myself through the setup. And I know I always want to start my sprint somewhere in this, see this green section here? Somewhere in this green section at this stop sign, that's my starting point. And what I can then do is measure sort of the length of my sprint down this straight section of road. So if I'm doing a short sprint, I literally might just go to where that white car is, so maybe 3 seconds. If I'm doing a long sprint, I kind of go round to the next bend, which might take me between 15 and 20 seconds. So first tip is, if you're, especially if you're doing your sprints in the same place, start them in the same spot every session. Okay, next tip is, think about if you're in the gym doing, let's say, squats, you're not just gonna load the barbell up, walk up to it, and just drop and do your sprint. No, like when you're in the gym, you walk up to the squat rack, you put your weight on, you go underneath the bar, you make sure it's comfortable, you lift the bar up off the rack, you take 2 steps back, you make sure your feet are planted, you take a few deep breaths, and then you drop down for your rep. So doing sprints on the road is the same thing. You don't just ride along and suddenly, okay, I'm gonna do a sprint now, and bang, you're out of the saddle. Make sure once you've set the point that you wanna start the sprint at, give yourself 10, 15 seconds before to make sure you've got a nice firm grip on the handlebars, you're in your appropriate gear. So, whether you're doing over-geared sprints or preferred geared sprints, whatever you're doing, make sure the gear's set in, locked in, nice and ready to go. Your feet feel good, your boas on your shoes are tight, you take a few deep breaths, run yourself through that setup process to make sure you've got full focus for that first sprint every time you do one. So the sprint starts, the stop sign that I was just pointing out was just around this bend and down the hill. So this is probably 20 seconds away from where I am, and this is where I'll start my setup. So I'll run you through it now. Gravel bike. All right, we've got some clear road. Flip it round. Okay, so first thing, setting up my gear. I kind of know what gear I want to start in based on my start speed. Some sort of big ring midway down the cassette. Obviously, I hope you're sprinting in the drops. So setting my position in the drops, rolling the legs over, shoes are tight. Again, just starting to relax. I can see where I want to start the sprint up there where those cars are. Flick it up into one harder gear. All right, set my grip, count myself in. 3, 2, 1, bang. Oh. All right, I'm out of breath, but that felt pretty good. So you can just see there the difference taking the time to set up for the sprint. Nice firm grip, just essentially being very intentional with it. Not just riding along willy-nilly and then suddenly you decide to sprint. Taking the time to set up and then execute well can really put some legit power on your sprint without actually getting stronger or sprinting any better.